this is Mitzi Goose, and I'm here to tell you how to label your shafts. Many people have asked us, where do you get that numbered ribbon? And the answer is, we made it and you can too. So a lot of people say, oh, I don't need to label my shafts, or I just wrote on it with a pencil. And if that works for you, then we're very happy. However, we're newbies and we just wanted to make our life easier. We also didn't want to color the heddle eyes. And I will admit, we color our heddle eyes because the white heddles are very difficult to see. But we color code them by the size of the heddle and which loom it belongs with. And that way, if we have more than one loom that uses Texsolve, we don't mix up the different sizes of Texsolve heddle. But we don't color the heddles for each shaft because if you try to move the heddles around, then you're going to end up with the wrong colored heddle on the wrong shaft, and it's just going to get very confusing. I know that some people have strategies of only using four colors and things like that. Frankly, it's so much easier just to look down at the shaft and see the shaft number than to remember that we're looking for the fourth shaft with red heddles and stuff like that. Now, we did try painting the shafts. Not only was that a huge pain in the butt to do the painting and then put a second coat on, etc. The paint did come off on the Texsolve cord, but not on the heddles, so that was a good thing. And it also didn't tell you which shaft number it was. So while it was helpful to see that you were now using a different shaft than the shaft you used before, it was still hard to remember which color was which number shaft. And so you ended up counting again and just didn't like that. Now, when you have more than four shafts, counting is time consuming. Unless you're really experienced and you can glance at it and just know which shaft you're on. Trying to count and make sure is going to be difficult while you're doing a lot of threading. Now, of course, if you're talented enough to just know which shaft it is by looking at all the same colored shafts, you wouldn't need to number them either. For the rest of us, I think that putting the numbers on the shaft is much easier. I will say that I have learned from experience that the place that I look to see where the shaft numbers are is on the top of the bottom shaft bar. You can't really see them from the front of the shaft bar when you're looking at the shafts beyond shaft number one. And I don't personally look at the upper shaft. I only look at the bottom shaft. So that's why I put the numbered ribbons on the top of the bottom shaft. Okay, so what am I going to need if I want to make these ribbons? First off, you're going to need a color printer, and that could be an inkjet or a laser jet. If you do not have your own color printer and you don't have a friend with one, then you might be able to call a place like FedEx or UPS store and see if they have a color printer and they can print your t-shirt transfers for you. The next thing you're going to need is satin ribbon. And when I say that, I'm saying you need the woven satin ribbon, not the really stiff, plasticky stuff that they call ribbon that is actually easy to shred. You don't want like gift wrapping ribbon. You want a satin fabric ribbon. The other thing I'll tell you is that I had tried twill tape. I don't know why I thought twill tape was the best, but I did try that, and the texture of the twill tape actually interfered with the t-shirt transferring onto it evenly. And so the end result did not look very good. So that's when I ended up going with the satin ribbon and found that it transferred the best. Next, you want iron-on t-shirt transfer paper, and you want to buy the paper that goes with your printer. If you buy an inkjet transfer for a laserjet printer, you could end up ruining your printer. So make sure that you buy the appropriate transfer for the printer you're going to use. These transfers also come in the transfer for light colors and the transfer for dark colors. I would recommend that you use a white satin ribbon and then buy the transfer for light colors. Then the PET acrylic tape. I got mine on Amazon and it's very easy to find. This is a very thin double-sided tape. It has a translucent kind of red orangey backing. We're not talking about the solid red backing with the thick gel tape. We're talking very thin heat resistant tape. Now, it doesn't have to be heat resistant, but coincidentally, this is heat resistant tape. And that's how you can identify it when you're looking at different products. Now, I tried different tapes, and I would almost recommend that you take just a piece of satin ribbon and tape it onto a piece of wood and leave it in your house and see if it falls off. I've had several different tapes which fail after a few days and the ribbon's just fallen off. So that's when I knew, okay, we need to move on to a different tape. I believe that this happens due to the humidity. And so depending on what kind of environment you have at your house, you may need to use a different type of tape, but that's why I tell you to test it before you go through doing this entire project. And then you want to make a file that looks roughly like the file shown here. Make sure that the file has the numbers reversed in mirror image, because when you cut out the t-shirt transfer and you iron it on, then the numbers are going to reverse again. So if you want the numbers to be in the right direction on your loom, when you print it, you want them to be mirror image. And here I used Adobe Illustrator, but you can use PowerPoint or whatever software you have that can create a file similar to this. So how do I make this? Okay, first you want to print the file onto your iron-on transfer paper and then cut each line apart so that you have strips. Now make sure to print some extra lines so that you can experiment with your ironing technique. So if you're going to a friend's house or you're going to a service to have this done, get at least one sheet of extra transfers so that you can experiment. Now you want to cut your satin ribbon the length of the shafts and then seal up the edges. So you either want to hem it, serge it, or use an electric rope cutter, which is what I did. And I've got another video on use of the electric rope cutter. Now, using a very hot iron, you want to iron these strips to your ribbon. Now, the t-shirt transfer paper that I bought recommends that you use a t-shirt press. However, I was able to use a professional seamstress iron and it did work. I suspect that a general household iron would not have worked. Be careful if you have any steam holes on your iron, because where there are steam holes, the transfer will not stick. So that's where you're going to need to carefully move your iron around so that if there are steam holes that you get a solid area of your iron over those areas so that you get an even coverage of heat onto your ribbon. The other thing you need to be aware of is some iron-on papers require that the transfer be hot when you peel it off. Other transfer papers require that the transfer be cool when you peel the backing off. You want to make sure you understand which type of paper you're using so that you peel the backing off at the correct time. Now, if I had a choice, I would buy paper that require that the transfer be cool when you peel the backing off, because it's much easier to know when the item is cool enough to remove the paper versus when it's hot enough to remove the paper. Now, when you're all finished and your ribbons are cool, then you can use the acrylic tape to put the ribbons onto the top of your bottom shaft bar. Now, depending on the width of your loom, you may have to space out the different strips of your numbers, or you may be able to put them closer together, or you can print, 4 strips and get them all as close together as possible. It's totally up to you, and really it depends on how much paper you have. Now, here is the final result, and admittedly, it's not perfect, and we did have some peeling errors that you don't see here, but I think it serves the purpose. I can glance down, see which shaft I'm on, and do my threading with fewer errors. Also, when the shafts are lifting and lowering, if I have a problem, I can quickly see which shaft is moving and which one isn't so that I can figure all this out. Other frequently asked questions. How long did this really take you to make? I would say in total, it probably took about 15 minutes per shaft, assembly line style. So we drew all the lines on the computer, got them printed out, cut them out, and then sat there with an iron and ironed them all off, and then put the tape on and then put it on the shafts. So, that means that for 8 shafts, it may have taken 2 hours, roughly. Do you like this? Of course we like it. We wouldn't tell you if we didn't like it. And while they're not perfect, it has saved so much time and frustration that it was well worth the time to make. Now, some people might ask, why didn't you put the numbers on the front of the shaft? It's because when the shafts are all lined up, the only front of shaft you see is the first shaft. Every other one is covered up. So while you could move the shafts out of the way to check, it's just as easy to glance at the top of the bottom of the shaft bar. And then if you're wondering which loom I have, this one is our Uxabac Lila, which we lovingly call Delilah around here. That's the loom we're using. We also have a Toika Eva that we're going to redo all the ribbons on because we like this top part better than the sleeve version of this numbering method.